Are you ready for the hot seat?
Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. My next guest says electricity is the new supply chain bottleneck, and we are entering what he calls the great decoupling. What does that mean? I'm not sure, but we're about to find out. Please welcome in the hot seat, Jonathan Brooks, CEO of Warehouse on Wheels. Jonathan, welcome to the hot seat.
Thanks, Spencer. Appreciate you having me.
Well, listen, we're going to heat things up here in a little bit, but why don't you take 30 seconds and just give us a little sense of the work that you're doing over there at Warehouse on Wheels.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So at Warehouse on Wheels, we're really looking to solve space constraints. So we're using a 53-foot dry van to provide safe, dark, and dry, flexible industrial storage to any number of people throughout their supply chain. I like to say from the first mile to the second to last mile. If you have a pressure point in your supply chain, you need just a little extra space, we're the guys to call.
I think that's a pretty good overview. We'll jump right in there. So I'm going to get right into it with a little bit of an article from Freightways. This is like last week. Title, Trailer Storage Demand Rises as Tariffs Nearshoring Reshapes Supply Chains. Fascinating article. Obviously, it's all about you guys and what you're doing. But in this article, you talk about companies are increasingly looking for ways to convert fixed logistic costs into more flexible operating expenses. So what about what you're doing is creating that flexibility, and what value is that creating for your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, our view of the world is uncertainty is the norm. So from the latest tweet from our friends in Washington to geopolitical risk to any number of issues within a given company's ecosystem and supply chain, there's typically an uncertainty, a chaos that occurs. And with that sometimes comes the need for flexible space. Our solution that we provide is an alternative to fixed warehouse space. When things happen on short notice, when you've got to respond quickly to challenges in your operation, we're the right pressure relief valve. You don't have to run to corporate and get an approval for a 5, 7, 10-year lease. We're providing you a solution that's generally 2 to 4 times less expensive on a per square footage basis, and it's a 30-day evergreen contract. So you call us, we show up within 24 to 48 hours with the solution, our 53-foot dry van, and provide you that pressure relief valve in your business. To the point where we've saved our customers, we have almost 6,000 of them these days, over $100 million in the last 12 months versus traditional warehouse space.
Wow, that's remarkable. So before we go any further, let's just talk about how did you get here? When did your company come on the scene, and what was your background up to this point?
I was a customer. So I was running a stuffed warehouse for a family-owned business that imported products from Asia. And I had containers arriving irregularly, poorly planned. The warehouse was busting at the seams, and my patriarch that ran the business was a little miserly and didn't want to rent an additional warehouse space. So I turned to storage trailers. In fact, it's a company that's still a competitor of mine in Greater Cincinnati, where one of the cities where we operate. And as I looked out my window one night and realized I was renting about 150 storage trailers to solve my problem, I thought, is there a bigger business here? You know, who else does this? And what I found in my research was it was highly fragmented, a lot of small family-owned businesses that had evolved over time. And so I saw an opportunity, and I aligned with some like-minded investors. We started in 2018 with our first platform. We bought Meisler Trailer Rental in Evansville, Indiana, 2 locations, about 4,000 trailers. And that was late 2018. As of this morning, I have 37 locations, almost 35,000 trailers from Montreal, Canada to Monterrey, Mexico. So we've been on a pretty blessed run, having done 25 acquisitions, having greenfielded about 10 to 12 cities where we simply rolled into town and planted a flag and went to work. And it has proven to be a very viable, a very valuable, and a welcome solution to many in the supply chain.
Wow. What a story. And it sounds like it's just beginning from my standpoint. So very glad to be with you to learn more. I teased this electricity issue on the front end of the episode. Tell us a little bit more about this data center elephant in the room and the gap between building the actual concrete walls, but then actually having the electricity available to service that need. Like, why is that compounding the problem that we're talking about here?
Yeah, I have a unique perspective on that. One of my 7 tours of duty with different private equity firms in my career was a power transformer company, Coleman Electric. So back in the early 2000s, we were reshaping that company for the Carlyle Group and ultimately sold it to ABB. But we were building power transformers. And at the time, the U.S. infrastructure was highly dated, very aged infrastructure, a lot of failures, blackouts in New York back in the day, and things like that were really driving this awareness to the fragileness of the grid. Well, fast forward to today, some probably 20 years later, that grid's still dated, still fragile, and now we're putting the burden of data centers on top of it. So what I wrote about in my blog post was talking about, okay, we've had this explosion of warehouse space during the COVID era, and that's somewhat come back into balance post-COVID. But now there's this competition from this thing that didn't exist, kind of 5 years ago at this scale, and that's the data center build out. And they're very power intensive. So one of the challenges I think operators are going to have in their supply chain is finding that ability to grow their physical footprint in the form of warehouse space because of the constraints that data centers are putting on that ecosystem, whether it be construction materials and resources, and then ultimately the power grid. And so again, the mobile solution we're going to provide, economically more favorable than warehouse space, doesn't require incremental power. Heck, we're EcoVadis certified. So we're showing up with an environmental certification because our business is built on repurposing former over-the-road trailers to provide this mobile solution.
I've got the blog article that you mentioned here. And just to put this in perspective, I think these are fascinating data points here. A modern warehouse may draw 1 to 3 megawatts. A single large AI campus requests 200 to 500 megawatts. Just the amount of power that's required to do these things is unreal. And so you can see pretty clearly the problem that you're attempting to solve. Pretty fascinating. So you mentioned how acquisitive your group has been over the last, 8 years now? 25 transactions. Well done on number one side. So much of our audience are either planning for an exit, they're trying to level up their growth strategy through acquisitions. What have you noticed about best practices for your group as you thought about growing via acquisition? Because, whether you're on freight tech, whether you're on the warehousing, whether you're on the truckload or even on the brokerage, what I think everybody's kind of recognizing is that to be competitive, even to capitalize on the existing technology, scale's critical. And so getting this as a skill set is going to be pretty important moving into that. So again, back to the best practices, what are some of the things that have worked for you guys along the way that have allowed you guys to be so prolific over that 8-year period?
So I think a couple of things. In our space in particular, the acquisitions have involved a lot of family-owned businesses. And so I think showing up with the emotional intelligence to understand the seller's perspective, we're literally talking to them about likely one of their children, if you will. And so being able to relate to that, to help them appreciate the fact that we are going to be stewards of what they built going forward. One of the things I'm most proud of is, of all our acquisitions, I am confident in saying all but maybe one of them would be actual personal references for us in the process. And the only one that wouldn't was a guy that didn't really understand the non-compete and tried to start a business next week after we bought his. But that's for another day. So I think it's that. I think it's building a process. Exactly. I think it's also then building the processes and the muscle for the integration side of it. When we buy these businesses, they are fully integrated in the first 90 days post-close, and it's because we've treated it as an operating process. So we have an internal team that will arrive on site day one and immediately start the integration with the subject matter experts. Now, it's not because we have a huge team. It's people that actually, in addition to their day job, have embraced this growth strategy and support that effort.
I'm interested because a lot of folks, it's a challenge when you have a day job and now you have this additional responsibility of the integration. What has allowed your group to buy in to that? Because, obviously that's a function of culture and belief that, as far as what you're trying to accomplish there. What's in it for them, I guess, is the question on the integration side.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great point. So I think a couple things. One, from the very beginning of building this business, I decided that we were going to frame our culture on some core tenets, and I grounded them in the concepts of the book Extreme Ownership. So from the day you start with us, you get a copy of the book. We do book club. We send you to training. We get you into the deep experience and understanding of what it means to take extreme ownership. So that's foundational. Secondly, we built our incentive programs around, your weekly paycheck, your quarterly bonus, but then everyone being shareholders in some form or fashion in the business. Now we're private equity owned, so there's different structures around it, but essentially everyone will benefit from the next event in an economic sense. And so that really helps to drive that alignment and that understanding of value creation.
No, I love that. The extreme ownership concept is actually a shared value at Tenney Group. And I'm very, I think what our team has just through the years has really bought into is the fact that, and you can appreciate this being involved in as much M&A as you are. We constantly say, what does extreme ownership mean to us? It means that we're responsible for conditioning the environment around us to produce the required result. That's it. And so in a deal making sense, yes, there's economic, there's completely macro issues we can't control. There's personality things we can't control. Still, true to extreme ownership, it's still on us to go reframe the current situation and go get the required result. And I can tell you, it's blessed us, it's blessed our clients, and certainly everybody at the table by having that type of mentality. It's no wonder that you guys are moving at the speed and at the effectiveness that you guys are doing right now. Love that. So also in that Freightways article, you kind of preview what's ahead for your group, talking about 100,000 trailers, 100 sites, combination of organic and inorganic strategies as part of that. What about that gives you energy? What are you excited about? Kind of going into that's, you're kind of halfway there. What are you excited about on this second half of the journey to get to that point?
Yeah, I think for me, it's seeing the growth of the team, the guys that started with me at the very beginning and are now executive leaders are really driving the strategy and the execution day to day. I like to say I'm the not so pretty window dressing of all this. The team that's making this happen is guys that were my operations managers, my general managers early on. They're now C-level executives. And so to me, I'm at the point in my career where I want to build that legacy. I want to leave something way better than I found it and something that's sustainable, because through our private equity ownership cycles, I've seen people be rewarded and financially have milestones in their family that they wouldn't otherwise attain. And so we've got this value creation engine. We've got this playbook. It's all about execution, and that's the fun part.
I love that. As you were talking, we recently did a series, part of our kind of Tenney University ongoing education around M&A, and was featuring about 6 of our past clients, and the title was Leadership Drives Value Creation. And one of the stories was about Jeff Colonna, former owner of American Petrolog. We helped him sell the Keenan Advantage Group. But like so much of what you're describing, I swear it's like Jeff talking to me. This is exactly like how he set it up, how he got alignment with his people, massive incentives to go the extra mile and to have extreme ownership. So it's really exciting to hear you kind of going in a similar direction and already getting that traction. It's very cool. Speaking of leadership, my production team, when we were kind of prepping for this, are like, you got to ask this guy about leadership. He's all over the place. Like he's doing all this stuff. So I am curious. Clearly, like this is something you're passionate about. I'm more interested in like, where are you getting fed from a leadership standpoint? Like where are you drawing inspiration as you kind of drive this new chapter in your company's life cycle? Where are you drawing inspiration for how to lead your group and your people towards excellence?
I guess I would tell you that the beginning of it was this just uncanny timing of events. I walk into this dinner about somewhere between 10 and 12 years ago, and there's only one seat left. I'm late to the dinner. And it's between these two guys that look like they're out of central casting from a military recruitment poster. And it was this PE-backed event, so a bunch of CEOs and CFOs, overweight, middle-aged guys. And I thought, okay, they're either security or I'm not sure what's going on here, but this is going to be interesting. So we had dinner over a matter of an hour and a half or so, and they're telling me stories. And come to find out, they're retired Navy SEALs. And it was Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, the authors of Extreme Ownership. So I literally sat between these two guys at the time the book was about to be released. They got up and gave what I believe was one of the first Extreme Ownership presentations. So long story short, at the very end of that presentation, they told a story, and the punchline of the story was, in the heat of battle, Jocko looking at his team and saying, if not us, then who? Basically framing it, if we're not going to do this, if we're not going to take care of this, then who is? And man, that clicked in my brain on a level that has been truly impactful. And I think about that often. And so I would say that's the foundation of what fuels it. And then the fact that I had this vision for Warehouse on Wheels and seeing it come to fruition is this sort of just feeding that flywheel. It's like, okay, we started with 2 locations and 4,000 trailers. And I remember a couple of the original owners that sold to us thought I was nuts. There's no way you're going to do this. This is, what are you thinking? Sure, I'll sell you my business. There's no way you're going to get to 30,000 trailers. And I'm so proud of the fact that when we sold it the first time, in some of those instances, we actually made the families more money on the second exit because they rolled equity than we did on the first.
Right.
And so again, just kind of that fuel to, okay, this is working, this is happening. And then the fact that the good Lord has blessed me beyond belief with this team that I have and the guys and gals that make it happen every day, man, I can't fail. I can't fail because of how much I care about them and what they've invested in me and the chances they've taken with me. So I've got this little thing, you can't see it, but a window off to my side in my office. And when I'm sitting in here and I'm feeling blue and I'm feeling sorry for myself, first of all, I have to check it and say, these are all first world problems. But secondly, I wrote, right, nobody cares, work harder. And that really, again, is one of those just brain breaks that I need to take to say, saddle up, let's go. And so that's sort of how I do it.
Well, it appears to be working. No, I love it. So, bigger picture in terms of the broader supply chain, what are some issues that you see or that you have your eye on that you think are particularly interesting? New developments in the space, things that you find disruptive, innovative, things that we might want to keep our eye on.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I think there's just this still gap between the senior levels of an organization, which are talking about AI and optimizing warehouse management systems and technology and infrastructure, all things that are very, very important. But then there's the folks on the front line who are dealing with the chaos day in and day out of the fact that there's 30 containers waiting at the door and we don't have anywhere to put them. And so I'm incurring, a couple $100 a day of detention fees. And so there's still this hand-to-hand combat that's happening on the front lines that, yes, there are technology solutions that will aid in that, but there's still going to be some level of disruption, inconsistency, uncertainty that I would say is a challenge for some at the senior levels of organizations to truly appreciate as they move through their careers. And that's where we love to play. That's why we love building personal relationships. That's why I built the business using a concept I call local market CEO. So the guy or gal that runs a city for me, the general manager formally, I call a local market CEO, because we empower them to hire, fire, buy, and sell all day long. And so I want them out there with those frontline folks and solving their problems in real time. And that's really, I think, key to what we do.
I had a podcast guest, brilliant mind in the warehouse automation space, and very young, had already started and exited multiple companies. And he was telling me about, I was like, where does this innovation, creativity, where does it come from? Entrepreneurial spirit. And he talked about his dad. He said his dad was very, very independently wealthy, probably by the age of 40, and retired. And so he was like 10, and he asked his dad, how did you get rich? How do I get rich? Basically. And he just thought about it for five silent seconds. And then he just says 2 words: solve problems. And that's it. And so you talk about your frontline, local CEO folks, when you empower them to do those things, some really remarkable things can happen. If we're not solving problems, chances are we're not really creating much value for ourselves or for anybody else. And so that's a good word right there. Hey, one final question for you, and this has been terrific. My wife and I, one of our ways to kind of wind down at the end of the night, if put the kids to bed, we'll put on The Office, and we'll just kind of have a creature comfort and watch our favorite show. So I'm looking behind you. I'm looking at some of our heroes. And so my wild card question to you, Jonathan, is if you had just a day to go have lunch with one of the Office characters, who would you choose and why?
Well, I got a good answer for you. I've had lunch with him. I've been on the set of The Office during filming. I actually, through a celebrity or a charity auction, won the right to go on set. So I have literally had lunch with Phyllis and all those guys and gals. And so it was an awesome experience. They were so welcoming. It was really cool. And I tell you, somebody asked me the other day about how my management philosophy, and I pointed to The Office, and I said, it's really, think about the ensemble that is The Office. Yes, Michael Scott is key. He is the main character, but that show would not be that show without Jim, Pam, hell, Creed and his one-liners every 2 or 3 episodes. All of those people making that all work to be such a great experience and show for all of us that still love it to this day. So yeah, I've got my autographed poster behind me. I've got my Michael Scott Somehow I Manage book off to the side there. They're great conversational pieces for times like these. Second only to my Jordans, my Jordan 1s that I had made custom with our logo on them that I have back there behind me. So yeah, I'm a huge fan and love the show and enjoyed having lunch with most all of them.
Well, that is excellent. Hey, listen, Jonathan, I really appreciate you sharing with us. Keep up the great work at Warehouse on Wheels. Phenomenal story, and we'll keep our eye on you. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat. We will see you next time.